Awesome. Welcome, fun friends.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I think we're going to get started, and I'm certain that we're going to have more people joining us. So I'll make my introduction just a minute. But I wanted to say welcome, everybody, to the first workshops of the Minnesota Music Summit, our 11th annual summit. Yesterday, we started out the conference with a bunch of live music, which was amazing. And today we're doing workshops and panels, and then tonight we'll be at Fairmont Opera House. But yeah, I'm really excited to introduce you to Ash Hanson and Brian Laidlaw, who are joining us today. Ash and I actually got to work together at the Minnesota Theater Alliance. And at that time, I also knew she was a board member of Minnesota Music Coalition. So I'm so excited for you two to join us and present. And thank you so much.
Hi there. I feel like we might be having some, if you are not muted and chatting, would you mind to mute your mic while we get settled here? Great, thanks. Well, there'll be lots of opportunities to take that off mute and participate in conversation for sure. So hello and welcome. My name is Ash Hanson. I'm the Executive Director of the Department of Public Transformation. We're based in Granite Falls, Minnesota on Dakota homeland. We're a border community with the Upper Sioux community and have a deep connection to the history and the complex history and relationship to this place. So we are excited to co-host this session with musician and poet Brian Laidlaw. And I'll let you give a quick intro, Brian, then we'll kind of dive into some of that work.
Sounds good. Yeah, my name is Brian Laidlaw. I'm a poet, songwriter, collaborate with Ash in a band called The Family Trade. And a lot of the touring that I've done in the past has been in this sort of community-oriented way that includes community-based songwriting workshops and collaborative songwriting and recording projects with local communities and small towns. And so it's been a part of my career for the last decade or so, and sort of the main way that I've essentially made touring sustainable. And so I'm really excited to get to talk about it this morning with everyone.
And since we are a small group to get started here, we'd love to just go around quickly and hear from folks in the room. If you identify as a musician or supporter of music or musicians, if you're a host, wherever you fall kind of on that spectrum, and where you're based, if you happen to or find a rural community, one of your heart places, so you can kind of see where people are landing. And in that, if there's like, a history of touring, which seems so distant from us at this moment, but history of touring to and with rural communities. We'd love to kick it off with Tom. Would you mind saying hello?
Yes, I'm happy to say hello. From Minneapolis. I've run a label, Modern Radio, for the last 20 some odd years. And I think in the past, our label used to have a lot more connections with shows in rural Minnesota when I felt like when there was more like coffee shops and DIY venues in like St. Cloud and Mankato and Rochester and what have you. And I don't know when it happened, but there's definitely a turn probably around, 2010 or maybe a little earlier, where it felt like there were less places where where kids were like organizing like all ages shows.
Interesting.
Thank you for that context, Tom. I hear that for sure. Anthony.
Yeah, hi. I'm Anthony. I am a marketing professional based in Minneapolis. I've been working for First Avenue and Minnesota Opera over the past few years. I don't have any experience marketing shows in rural Minnesota, but I'm from a small town in West Central Minnesota, so I'm just kind of curious.
Which small town are you from?
I'm from Fergus Falls.
You're from Fergus Falls. You do a lot of work in Fergus Falls.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So just excited to, be here and hear where the conversation goes.
Thanks, Anthony. Janice?
Yes, hi, everybody. I am a board member for Minnesota Music Coalition, so I'm really excited for this particular group to talk, because we really are working so hard to try to connect with all of Minnesota as an organization, and that's really fun. Years ago, I had a residency with a small musical group that I was in. We were in Virginia, Grand Rapids, International Falls, Hibbing, and we went back multiple times to each community from the Twin Cities. And it was such an enriching experience and just so much fun to see the arts really at work in all of these communities. So I hope to learn something about what you're doing and your work, and then to really encourage artists to see the whole state as really viable places to be. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Janice. And John?
I'm John Munson. I have a.
Hi, John. Good to hear your voice.
I watch with a lot of interest your activity out in the Granite Falls area, and I love what you're doing, and it's exciting to me. Isn't that where you are? Isn't that Granite Falls?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
You nailed it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I have a sculptor friend who lives out there named Doug. I can't remember his last name, but he does some very provocative sculpture work, and his family is from Granite Falls. And I know he had gone to kind of settle down out there after a long career in kind of hedge funds and things like that in New York, so I think he probably bought the biggest house in Granite Falls and is living on a mountain somewhere made of granite. But anyway, this is a topic of long-standing interest to me. I have been extremely privileged to have received a number of Arts Tour grants, which has given the New Standards the opportunity to go around and perform at a lot of the amazing performing arts centers that are located around the state. And we've more than scratched the surface, I would say, but we haven't played as many of them as we would like to. I know there's a lot more opportunity out there to do that. And I guess the reason that I was curious about this panel, and I really love the title of it, because I feel like compassionate engagement is what we're all trying to accomplish when we take our show out on the road. And I feel like in many cases, that desire may not be completely resonant with community members always. I think sometimes they're confused by the offerings that come into their towns and wonder, why this thing has arrived and that they're, that they need to see it. And I think that's a big struggle. I think a lot of times that things are coming at them a little bit from on high, as it were. And I think meeting them where they are is that what you want to be doing, but it's hard because it doesn't always feel like where that is particularly. And I would love to know anybody's experiences about where they felt like they've had a really successful outcomes in meeting those communities where they are and having really successful performances. Because I've got an arts tour coming up in the fall, and I want it to be a huge success because it's too hard to get to these places and to not actually have a great outcome. So that's what I have to say.
John, thank you so much. There was so much richness in what you just shared and experience that I think a lot of musicians and touring artists have in and with rural communities. And one of the first things I'd love to say too is that there is no one-size-fits-all model, as you all know, but the approaches that we're going to talk about today that we've utilized also have a lot to do with long-term relationships, and one of the terms that we use a lot in the art of the return. And so how we, the art of visiting, but also the art of the return. And so knowing that, and I know you know this, John, as somebody who returns to many places around the state, but knowing that the first go around, you might not have as many folks, but what can you do during that time to ensure that you then have champions and cheerleaders for the return? And once you do build that trust with the community, how strong of a web that they will make with you. So when you land, that you'll be caught in a broader and broader web of engagement each time. Brian, do you want to jump in quick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think about this a lot in terms of like status relationships, and like you're saying, John, this idea of like coming in on high. I think there is often in a lot of the small towns that we've gone to a sort of feeling of like when people are coming in from the cities, it's a big deal, and I found like playing shows in the cities, sometimes that status relationship is good, like having the kind of high status, like we're the performer and it's our big show and you're going to come and be impressed by our show on our big stage. And like, that's part of the allure or something. And I think that one of the things that I've really worked at in going to these small towns is kind of trying to do the opposite and come in this sort of like, we're all equals here. Everybody's just hanging out. We're, going to have this really like sort of more like non-hierarchical show experience where there's room for the audience to be interacting and talking, and so that it really feels like there's not that same kind of feeling of like intimidation or something of people coming in from the cities. It's kind of a funny sort of deferral of status in some ways. But then as far as like the, having stuff be successful, especially the first time that you're going through town, I think that just partnerships with local organizations is kind of the be all end all. Having someone on the ground in the town where you're headed who is able to contextualize what's going to happen, and why you're coming into town and what it's going to be like, and essentially sort of vouch for you as you're, in the lead up to the event, so that people will know, well, so-and-so at the local, whatever, the, from City Hall said that it's going to be a good show, or so-and-so from the bar said that it's going to be cool. And so it's worth checking out. And so that kind of like on the ground word of mouth and we found even just one local person who's an advocate can rally the troops and get a great turnout to show up for the thing. And then anything you want to add to that, Ash?
Well, I was just gonna say I have like a few little slides with some grounding of kind of a way that we think about entering and exiting community. So I would love to just take about 5 or 10 minutes to share those, to get some common language in our approach, and then open it up for more conversation about specific examples or specific questions that you all have. And just to let you know a little bit about our organization, the Department of Public Transformation, we're an artist-led organization that's at the intersection of creativity and civic life. So we work in and with small towns and rural communities, primarily around the upper Midwest, but also have a bit of a national reach as well, to amplify the stories of local rural artists and to help connect rural artists with each other, to learn different tools and tactics, strategies, and then bringing more of that urban-rural exchange that John and Brian have both been talking about here too, with rural places. So how are we learning from neighbors across these perceived geographic divides, and what that can bring us in terms of enriching those relationships and breaking down those, building more of those bridges of understanding. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly share my screen. So a couple of projects that I just wanted to mention. The Department of Public Transformation like I mentioned, works with local communities to help identify the assets of their place, including the cultural capital of the place. So who are the local artists that are already doing this kind of work and thinking about stepping outside of the studio into more of a social practice setting or a civic practice setting, which means bringing your artistic practice into the world of community engagement. Those are the kinds of artists and organizations that we're working with. And then I also run a theater company called Place-Based Productions. And Place-Based Productions works with the community, a small town, for a year. It's a year-long engagement, and I want to make that part very prominent, because it's if we were to just do a one-off show where we're bringing something into a community for a weekend, we wouldn't have the same kind of success we have. Knowing that not every touring musician or every band can spend a year developing a relationship with the place, but just to kind of name that it really does take quite a long time to build the kinds of relationships that we do to have the success that we have as writing original musicals based on history and stories of place, working with local musicians to celebrate and amplify those voices. We also work with Sod House Theater. Brian and I have worked with Sod House Theater for a number of years as the musical directors for touring shows that goes into rural communities and performs traditional shows that have been adapted to address contemporary issues. So for example, An Enemy of the People, which is a play about water quality. We wrote the bluegrass musical version of that show that looks at water quality in a contemporary light, and then toured it to communities that were having challenges with their local watershed and water stream. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also partner with Zamia Theater Company that works with people experiencing homelessness, and we've created a touring show called A Prairie Homeless Companion, a little play on Garrison Keillor there, and looking at the realities of rural homelessness. With that production, we work with, again, local musicians or musicians that have a connection to the lived experience of homelessness, or working in the service, in the social services realm connected to housing and homelessness. So again, making those kind of connections around the social impact of the work that we're doing. We also run a program called Town Tracks, Brian and I do, where we spend again, about a year working with the community, doing interviews, story circles, deep research, spending time with the environment, getting to know the local ecosystem, and then writing a series of 5 songs, a short EP about that place that we record with local musicians. And then our band, The Family Trade, I would say, and Bri, you can add to that too, but I would say we tour primarily in rural communities. We find, performing at small cultural centers, in house concerts, or in venues like the one that we run out here in Granite Falls, which is called the Yes House, which is like a half-done Main Street building, kind of what Tom was saying earlier, these DIY spaces, having a network of those spaces that we visit with after we've gotten to build these relationships through these kinds of projects that really reflect and elevate the local stories and culture of a place. Bri, I'll pause here if you want to say anything about your work with unrestricted interest or any of that piece of it. Oh, I can't see you, so I don't know if you're passing it on. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, friends. Yeah, I see that bio refers to McNally Smith College of Music, and I do see a couple of McNally friends here. So rest in peace, pour some out on the curb for McNally. And then, done a couple of books with Milkweed based in the Twin Cities, and a lot of the touring on those books has been sort of taking place up on the Iron Range. A lot of the writing that I was doing at that time is about the economies up on the range. And then also, this is sort of adjacent to what we're talking about here. I co-founded an organization called Unrestricted Interest that does poetry and songwriting mentorship for individuals on the autism spectrum. And so that's another kind of community-oriented collaboration, writing songs with a lot of actually non-speaking autistic songwriters, and then performing their tunes and sharing that work. So a lot of it's just sort of community-oriented collaborative art making.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
So this is just like the snapshot of how I think about an arc of visiting a place. So the pre-work that you do before you enter a community. So let's say that you get a touring grant and you're going to play a show at a library in a town of 900 people. One way to do that would be to, have a few email exchanges with the librarian, send over a promo poster and show up an hour before the show, set up your thing and say, wow, 3 people came. Dang, I drove for 5 hours and then, pack up your stuff and leave and go like, wow, that was my experience in such and such of a place. Which is something that we have done, which is something that I would imagine others of you have heard of or done or felt. And then you might say, I don't really like that place. I don't want to go back to that place. And then that's kind of like the end of your relationship with that place. Another way, or one of many other ways of doing that, is this kind of arc that I think about when I'm visiting a place or when we're visiting a place. So what do you do to get to know that place before you come? What's the kind of research that you can do to see what are the greatest kind of recreational or artistic or economic assets of that community? What is the industry of that place? Is this an agricultural community? Is this a community that has a meat processing plant? Is this a community that's seen a relatively large demographic shift over the last 10 years? Is this a place that has increased in population or decreased in population? Is there a history of extraction? Is like this a mining community where things have been pulled from this place? And just kind of starting to understand the landscape of what the people who live in this community have been through. And so then you can kind of start to address that even in your marketing and in your partnerships, as Brian said, just like, well, how do you find a partner? How do you know who to talk to? Like, okay, well, if this is the main industry here is the hospital, because you do a few Google searches and you see that they're really proud of their new hospital. Is there a way that the partner organization, the librarian, could help connect you to somebody at the hospital who could send something out to their entire staff that says, all hospital employees get $1 off the ticket or something like that, right? So that you know that you're reaching this broad range of folks in that community. So relying on some of those local partnerships or the people who are asking and inviting you to join that community, but not just relying on them, because they also have full-time jobs and they're also probably working multiples of them, and trying to promote your performance might not be the top thing on their list, because they have a bunch of other events that they're doing as well. So what can you do to alleviate some of that work leading up to it? Now, if I were to hear that as a musician that's on a tight budget doing a tour and going, yeah, but that takes so much time. Like, how do I even have the capacity to do that kind of legwork of the research that it takes to get to know a place? Well, if you are doing this on a grant basis, make sure to write that into the grant and saying, we actually are going to visit less places so that we can do a better job of getting to know them before, during, and after those places. So we're going to write in more stipend for our time getting to know a place before arriving than visiting one more place, because you'll have more success in that relationship building and audience capacity.
And I would also just add to that another way to treat that is to do some of the research while you're writing the grant. Because if you are submitting a grant proposal that just says, I'm going to go to these 5 communities and do a show, and then you hit submit, then that lands in one way to the panel. But if you say, I'm going to go to these 5 communities, this is a mining community that has a history of such and such, and our music is going to communicate with this like element of such and such a thing. And then we're going to go to this town and they have a hospital there, and we want to do a wellness workshop and the songwriting thing in partnership with the blah, 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 or whatever, so then that'll feel like a really well-researched, carefully thought out grant. And that way some of the sort of contextualizing work has already happened in your mind as you're sort of putting this stuff together. Just something to think about.
Thanks, Brian. And then this idea of being in relation to or being in relationship with, really thinking about that. And I use the word relationship intentionally. Like, what is the courting process that you're doing? Like, how are you flirting with the place? How are you like teasing some of the things that you'll be doing or bringing to the community? Again, if that's you're visiting this town of 900 people, the librarian, asking them what Facebook groups that they are a part of as but one thing that to kind of start to sprinkle, say like, hey, I'm super excited to come to your community. I hope you come check out your show. But also, does anybody have any great ideas for restaurants that I should visit while I'm in town, or hikes I can go on? So they know that you're actually interested, not just in you showing up and them coming to you, but you are invested in wanting to know more about that community. You're showing an interest in them. You're batting your eyes at them a little bit, and starting to kind of figure out what that relationship is going to look like. It can also help gauge whether or not that interest is there, in which demographics, and if you're looking to specifically reach a certain demographic, like a younger audience, or you're working with the senior center or something like that, letting that inform which marketing strategies that you use, but really doing that legwork of I'm not just coming to you for you to appreciate me, but I'm coming to appreciate you, and intentionally setting that up in advance, because I know you all are doing that. You are coming to appreciate the place as well, but making it clear from the beginning. The art of and then this entering a place. So the arrival, and if you do have the capacity to write in an extra day or two or a week in the place, then that's obviously super helpful. One of our tactics and strategies is when we arrive early, hanging out at the local bar or whatever the night before to kind of start to meet people and seed this idea, the word of mouth piece of it. But we also have done a lot of work with hair salons, and I think that it's kind of funny, it's more of a cliche, but one of our best ways when we do our theater productions, one of our best ways to get the word out is to let the hairstylists know what's happening. And then, kind of we do a Main Street business engagement. So walking up and down Main Street and just saying hey, we're musicians, we're having a show tonight. This is a really cool shop you have. If they're, are folks coming in and they're looking for something to do, can you let them know that we have a performance tonight? It's $10. It's up the road. It's going to be great. And taking that hour to walk up and down the 3 blocks of Main Street, it's just completely transform, what your audience experience is like. In that entering as well, this is kind of the status thing that y'all were talking about earlier, is knowing that you're entering an existing stream of creative culture. You are not bringing the culture, the art to the place, that there are artists and musicians and rich well of culture already in existence there. So again, what can you do to celebrate and get to know and appreciate the art of that region? So whether that's finding other local musicians prior to arriving, or setting up a meeting with them when you arrive, hey, I see that you're a musician, I'm coming to town, would you like to grab lunch? And just talking a little bit about what it's like to be a musician in this community, so that the next time you come back, maybe you can co-bill with that person and they'll bring their local draw with, and you're building those relationships along the way. I'll pause there, Bri, if you have any additions here.
Yeah, I was going to mention co-billing for sure. And then, even I think in the cities, we're often very strategic about, we want to partner with such and such a band so that we have a bill that does such and such a thing and feels such and such a way. And I would say that, in some of these smaller towns where maybe there really is only one band, then they would be a great band to co-bill with. You know what I mean? Even if the genre seems like a weird fit or too similar or too different or whatever, just to have, again, that kind of gateway where people are coming to see something that's partly familiar. They know this one band, and then coming to see you and you're potentially unfamiliar. And then along with that, thinking about visual artists, partnering with a visual artist to do a show flyer, for example. We've done that in a lot of places. So then you have a local artist who's really proud to have done the flyer, and then they're promoting their flyer, but your flyer then is in turn promoting the show, blasting it on social media, and they're excited to go out and hang it because it looks cool and it's a cool thing that they got to do for this big band coming in from the cities or whatever it may be. And along with that, thinking about doing, getting a visual artist to do a gallery opening in conjunction with a show that you're doing in town or something like that. Maybe a visual artist whose work is somehow sort of in conversation with your own or some of the themes that your songs might be engaging with. But then that way you have someone in town who's invested in getting people to come out to the thing. And it just makes it for a richer sort of multimodal, multimedia experience to have some art on the walls and to have another artist there in the mix.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that fits right in with recognizing the local assets including the local talent, the local venues, the local spaces that celebrate art, and highlighting those as you're preparing for your work. Again, the kind of the social media piece of it, of like doing a quick Google search of what are the arts and cultural organizations or major supporting organizations in that region. And just reaching out to them even on social media and saying, you know, hey, I see you're the local arts council in this town of 900 people. We have a show at the library. I bet your constituents would be really into it. It'd be awesome if you'd share on your Facebook page, because they want more arts and cultural things happening there too. And for those folks who don't have a lot of experience in rural places, the regional draw is real. Like, we pull from 60 miles. So the town of Granite Falls is 2,600 people. People drive for an hour to come to our events, all of the time. So it's just like so like you don't have to just think about Granite Falls if you're visiting Granite Falls, but Montevideo, which is a town of 5,000 people, 15 miles away, or even going a little further to Wilmer, which is a town 45 miles away, that's, you know, closer to the 20,000 people, to promoting a show in Granite Falls, people will drive that far. So just being mindful of the kind of geographic reach of the places that you're promoting in and with. We really think about it in a more regional setting.
Yeah, and along with that, I would say local colleges, community colleges, that's another huge sort of resource in terms of trying to get the word out and get people excited about shows. Wherever you are in Minnesota, there's definitely a directional college somewhere near where you're going to be doing your show. And I think that a lot of those students we've found are sort of aware that like live music is a part of the college experience. And sometimes, you know, Tom, like you're saying, a lot of these smaller venues in greater Minnesota are not doing the same kind of like programming that they once did. And so I think there's a lot of hunger among those college students to like go to shows and have that part of the college experience. And so we definitely see, you know, a good posse of kids coming out from whatever, you know, southwestern Minnesota, SWSU, to stuff in Granite Falls for sure. And once you get same thing, once you get on the radar of a few of the kids in that college population, you have a really dedicated listenership of people who are super excited to support. Along with that, thinking about local radio also, when we're thinking about local assets, looking at regional radio and regional television stations. There's some awesome, awesome radio stations in greater Minnesota. And same thing, if you can show up a day early and do an interview or a live performance on the local station, or swing into the college and do, you know, whatever, like a little radio spot or video spot on the college radio station. I think those outlets do a lot. Like, a lot of people are listening to radio, and a surprisingly large number of people are watching community television too in some of those communities. So things that maybe feel like, you know, you wouldn't know that it would be such a huge impact, but people are definitely tuning in. And it's fun, more friends.
I was realizing that I was not progressing the slides because we have these broken down better. Like, I'm just going to progress for a moment. We'll get back to the
enjoy the fun pictures.
Yeah, I enjoy the fun pictures. I wasn't progressing the slides. I got too excited about what we were talking about. But, you know, thinking about this first photo in this slide here is in Fergus Falls. So I wanted to call that out, Anthony. We did a Hinge Arts residency with Springboard for the Arts, where we were based in on the Kirkbride campus for a month, and this an album of songs about ruralness that we wrote and recorded in an abandoned nurse's cottage from the former state hospital there. But just wanted to, bring this idea of reciprocal exchange to the forefront of what are you bringing, what are you leaving, what are you receiving, what are you taking, and how does that kind of equal out in that exchange with the community. So for us, it's a lot of sharing our skill set with the place. So we do a ton of workshops, whether it's like in schools or we have done happy hours, songwriting happy hours. There's been super successful the day of or before the show, where we just like call up the local bar and say, hey, can we offer a songwriting workshop? A songwriting happy hour, and promote that alongside of the show, and you'll get 10 or 15 musicians to show up to get excited about writing a song about their place or whatever prompt that you want to use, and then you've got 15 folks who now like you and are invested in you and you being there, who will then come to your show or bring your families to the show. Same thing with working with schools, which I'm sure a lot of you know too. But then you have kids who say, I really like this band, I want to go see them. And then they bring their family comes as well. So we do a lot of course, original songs about place. So that might not be what your practice is, but that's one way that we involve local community in that reciprocal exchange. So cruising through these photos of, what are the venues, who are the partners, where are the places where you can do like pre-shows. This image in this is in an office building on the top left. We did a luncheon at a office building. We're just like, you're there early, and there are 25 people that kind of slammed into a little office room to get to help build that audience, and looking at like who you're partnering with in a cross-sector setting, and then how you're kind of reflecting the stories of the place back. Same thing with the kind of like, where are you performing, highlighting some of the local assets of the place, involving young people, involving folks of all ages in some of the work that you're doing, having a jam session prior to the show, bonfire. We do a lot of bonfires, and then so here we're at reciprocal exchange with our workshops and offerings into different spaces like that. One of the other pieces of that work too, in terms of celebrating the community, this is more along the lines of the theater productions that we do, but if you're somebody who loves writing songs and you're touring around to small towns and rural communities, in that research phase that you're doing as you're flirting with the community you're visiting, maybe you do end up writing, you get inspired by something that you learn about the place, and you write a song about the place that you might want to share. And that could be another good promotional tool, but also just a helpful way of getting to know the community and saying, like, I'm interested in writing a song about this, or I'd like to co-create a song about your community. Can you show up an hour early and work with me on this, and then maybe even share it that evening? That's been a way that we've done that kind of thing. Anything else on reciprocal exchange, Bri, before I talk about this kind of the leaving?
No, I mean, this is just in the sort of partnership stuff. I was going to mention also like local newspapers, super active, super high visibility stuff going on in terms of the small town papers in a lot of these places. And so either thinking of the newspaper as a partner, or, I think so much about it is like just thinking of a way to tell the story of your show, your performance, your arrival in town, as like something that's not just people call them like parachute projects that just like drop in and appear for a second and then disappear. But even something as simple as like the difference between like, we're coming into town to do a show versus like, we came out and loved it last time and wrote a song, and we're going to debut the song at the concert at this thing and da. And then that's enough for like a newspaper to build a story out of it and help spread the word and give something for folks to latch onto. Just to, I think a little goes a long way in terms of the sort of indication that you care. And I think that there's this weird mix of, Ash, this, at least in my estimation, you may disagree or whatever, but I feel like there's a kind of interesting mix of like pride and shame in a lot of these small towns, where there's both this feeling of like, we love it here and this is the best place and it's so awesome, but also like, wow, why would anybody ever want to come here to play a show? And so I think sometimes people are like, in some ways feeling apologetic about their town, or like, oh, we're not as cool of a venue as First Avenue or what, whatever. But so if you can do something that just says, no, we really like it here, we're really excited about it, something in the lead up to that show that conveys that message, whether it's through social media stuff or through a radio appearance or through a newspaper appearance or whatever, I think people really glow with pride and excitement that you're excited to be in their town and that you've seen something that, a lot of people maybe miss about going to that town. And that they see as locals, and they just sort of assume that outsiders can't see or can't perceive how special it is. But if you're able to show that you see the specialness, they're really appreciative of it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. And I think, I just wanted to say, like, I think a lot of that, the narrative that small towns share or tell themselves that is kind of downplaying how great they are has a lot to do with the national narrative that's shared about rural spaces. So there's a lot of, talk about rural places being dying or declining, or, they're just damaging to the psyche of the place. And so anything you can do to help mitigate some of that, it is better for the whole field overall. So the performance happens, which is a small part of of the thing, even though it feels like it's the main part. But for us, it's really the smallest part of the thing. And then there's this, like, how do you honor the place once you leave? Like, what is a lot of these places? A lot of the communities we work with have a lot of people leaving, coming and going and not staying and maybe not returning. And so, like, acknowledging that like, the gentle exit of, like, the saying of goodbyes, the thanking, the, like, staying an extra day and showing up again on Main Street and saying hi to folks that showed up at your show, like the soft out, I think is really important to lay the groundwork for the return. And then, what if you did have a really powerful experience in this community or not, whatever, either way, like, if there's a way to kind of capture that and share that story back out so that you're helping to promote that, you come to Granite Falls and you have a great time and you take 3 minutes the next day to write a social media post that just says, Granite Falls is amazing. I had a great time there. Musicians should really think about playing at this venue, and tagging 3 people that came to your show and putting that up on social media. And that is just huge. It's just huge. It's just like, what a nice offering. And helping us feel like, we went through this extra effort to help you feel welcomed and hosted. And it's really nice that you thanked us in this public way to help bring more people to our community. And then, for us, we do a lot of recording of the shows, or recording with people and giving that back to them, so that there's ownership of kind of that participation. So if you do have, like, a mobile recording studio or something like that, or just, a microphone that plugs into your GarageBand, can you do something like helping local musicians do a quick record of a demo, or another way of or recording a story, or getting some young people together to sing on one of your songs, that before the show, again, like, oh, I'm looking for 10 local singers to come and do this quick thing with me before the show. Again, then they showed up, they have their voice on a thing, on a recording, they come to your show, and then afterwards you send it back and you say, here, really appreciated you singing on my song. It's just another way of building that.
And I think one other thing I would add to that too is that, like, I wouldn't at a show in Minneapolis, like, necessarily announce what my email address is at the show or whatever, but making that email address available to people, especially who come to the workshops. But even sometimes if it's a small show that's sort of an intimate conversational thing, saying, like, I'd love for this conversation to continue. If you want to be in touch, here's my email, drop me a line, feel free. Again, kind of breaking down that status thing and making it clear that, like, this is an ongoing conversation. It doesn't have to end when we leave town. And, it's rare that people follow up, but occasionally people do say, that I wanted to ask one more question, or can you listen to this song that I wrote at your workshop and let me know what you think of it, or whatever. And, it sounds like it would snowball into, like, a huge amount of additional correspondence, but it doesn't really end up being that much. And it really just means so much to people to feel like you've made yourself available to them. And the folks who do, take the minute to write the note and or share a song, or share, you know, a reflection maybe that they had during your show or whatever. Those are then going to be your most useful advocates the next time that you come to town. If you're able to drop a personal note that says, hey, you know, hope it's been a good season. We're coming back to town next month. You know, can you help spread the word? And like that one note to that one person as a personal email, they'll just like hit the ground for you and rally the troops in a way that is like sort of next level. Just another thing to think of.
Yeah, and just then we'll close the slides, but just that idea of the return of what you're bringing back with you when you come the next time, and letting folks know that you are going to return, but you know, keeping that word, I think, is important. You know, when you're setting up tours, it might seem like, oh, well, last year we went to Granite Falls, so we're going to skip this year. We'll go to another community. That can work to broaden your base, but I guess it's kind of thinking about, do you want to broaden your base or deepen your base? And for us, it's about deepening those relationships. So I would rather come back to Granite Falls year after year after year and let that deepening also broaden the regional reach than bopping around to new communities that I don't have relationships with. And in addition to that, then also like, you know, what is the social space that you carve out for yourself while you're visiting these communities? What is the after show? You know, we like, while we're at performances, we'll say, and meet us at the Legion afterward. And so, you know, this is where we're going to be hanging out when the show is over. We'd love to see you there. And then finding, you know, those spaces for social engagement and making friends with people so that when you come back the next time, you can stay on their couch. That's not the only reason, but yeah. So I'll just keep that up for a second, and then we'll close this screen and open it up. That was more of a presentation than I thought, but it was kind of fun to talk about it.
Such nice colors too in those slides.
Thanks. We got good brand colors. Awesome. So for reflection, same thing here. If there's questions that you have from that presentation or specific examples that you'd like to share about things that have worked for you in touring in and with rural communities, or just a reflection.
I have something.
Yes.
So I love hearing about the techniques that you guys have used to try and build audience in these smaller communities. How accessible do you think these gigs are to people? Now, one thing that I've observed is that, I mean, you can only play in Minneapolis so many times a month. You know what I mean? There's a point. There used to be back in the day a thing that would happen in the local press where a journalist would say, it's time for this band to get out of town, basically. You know, it's like, you've done your thing here now in the Twin Cities. We all have demonstrated that we love you. And now you need to kind of shove off into the wider world and see who you really are. You know what I mean? And it was always a hard message to get. On some level, but I think it's a message that any artist needs to hear, actually. You know, if they reach that point, I mean, which not everybody does. You may find that you're just perfectly content to play, you know, 4 times a year in the Twin Cities, and you don't want to go any further. But the problem is now, as I perceive it, as a person who doesn't really play the types of venues that I hear you guys describing, but what I kind of notice, what I hear from friends who want to play more widely in the state, is they don't know where are these venues? What are these venues? And if you have to do all the legwork of kind of finding these venues, is it worth it to any agent to actually kind of be booking these types of shows where the income might be so slight that, and it's still going to be 20 phone calls, especially because, you know, maybe the venue is not that up and running that they're doing shows all the time. So it's just like, yep, nope, come here at 3. We'll see you when you get here, you know, whatever it is not so seamless. I just kind of wondered, are these tools that are accessible? Are you guys making these tools accessible? Do you have lists of venues around the state that you could provide to artists who want to tour more widely around the state, or just take their show on the road and try and do some of these things that you're describing? I mean, it made me want to load up the station wagon, but there's no way I'm going to do that. But I mean, it did, for a second, it crossed my mind.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, I think that's such a good question. And Joanna, maybe you can talk a little bit about the, you know, how partnering with theaters too, with the Theater Alliance maps. But I also think that there's of course the Minnesota Presenters Network that has the larger venues, but this is something that we're working on here with the Yes House and a couple of other regional cultural centers like the Fairmont Opera House and like New York Mills Cultural Center and New London Little Theater. These venues that are like more in the 100%, I mean, not Fairmont Opera House, that's larger, but these venues that are like in the 100% or less audience size, but like the ROI in terms of your heart and like what those relationships bring are just, you know, out of this world outstanding. And so like we're looking at how we can do block booking for smaller regional venues and have the Department of Public Transformation really help musicians connect to spaces like this who have an ethos of you know, inviting, helping people land, and like sending them off in a way that feels good for everybody involved. So I would say, yes, I think it's coming, but I think there are resources that already exist.
A listserv like that would be something that would be really awesome. You know, I mean, that's like whatever, that's an old term or whatever.
No, that makes sense. That's really cool. Joanna, did you want to see?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting point because we actually had this great resource for this called Space Finder Minnesota that was administered by Fractured Atlas in New York, and then Springboard for the Arts and the Minnesota Theater Alliance partnered to bring it to Minnesota. In October of 2020, Fractured Atlas closed that program. So we are working on figuring out a way to take all the data we had from the previous resource and create a new version in Minnesota. So I would like to say that is on its way. And you know, coming from the Theater Alliance to the Music Coalition, you know, I was like, oh, the musicians don't know about Space Finder. And I went to look it up and I was like, wait, Fractured Atlas took it away. So we have to get that back in a new version. And so we're working on it.
John, another thing that crosses my mind is that, you know, I think that realistically, not many of these shows would be super lucrative just from the ticket sales. But I think that because so many venues in Greater Minnesota are getting State Arts Board funding to pay for their concert series, a way to approach it with your booking agent might be to see which of those venues have received funding that would support concert series. And then you know that those venues not only have funding, but are also actively looking for artists to fill the slots of the series that they've just received funding for. And so maybe targeting specifically those venues that you know just got a $20,000 touring arts grant or art support, whatever grant, and saying, hey, we saw you got this grant. You know, we're putting together a tour in Greater Minnesota. Here's what we cost. Would that fit into your budget? Kind of thing. And then that would make it, I think, a little more similar to, you know, booking shows in metropolitan areas. In some cases, possibly even with better guarantees, because those are pretty like frequently well-funded shows.
Yep.
But
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
I was only going to agree. I mean, my experience with the the different performing arts center executive directors is just that they're so happy to try and make something amazing happen in their community, and they're very energetic, and they can make many of the things that you were kind of outlining as activities that you view as integral to a successful outcome. If you're going to schlep all the way off to Detroit Lakes or whatever, if you just show up and play your show and split, it's probably going to be a kind of a marginal experience, but if you can kind of engage with the school, which to me is like the best part of these funded shows, is getting to go into the schools, because for me, in terms of my artistic development, seeing musicians up close actually who had like technique and performing chops that were more than my piano teacher or whatever, made me want to be a performer. Seeing people like that in my school, it was like such a difference maker for me. So I want to be that person for some kid to go like, what are they doing? This is something special that I haven't seen before. I don't have any illusions about my own capabilities, but I mean, I just do think that seeing on an ensemble play 5 feet away from you is transforming. I think, especially if you have an artistic bent. So to anybody who may be watching this now, or maybe watching it down the line, reaching out to those executive directors is a great idea. I think Brian's point that they do have resources to do performances, but I have to say, there's a lot of other really small organizations that kind of crop up in towns periodically. New York Mills, the one that you mentioned, the cultural center there is really something extremely special, and there's no, and that's a very small community, and they have a really thriving art scene. It's kind of very cool. I think somehow that artistic scene created a magnet in that region where people who are of that mind have kind of gravitated towards it, and it's kind of changing the community in ways that to me are exciting. I don't know what the people who were there before feel about it, but I would imagine that it's exciting to them too. And I played a gig down in St. James, Minnesota, that was kind of it was like just a group of local citizens took over a storefront that had been boarded up, and they turned it into a small performance space. And it was the funnest thing ever to just go down there and play. But I wish that there was a list so that young artists who wanted to test out their chops could access the people who are interested in seeing music in their communities by seeing this list of small venues. I wish that were available. I hope that the Fractured Atlas thing either comes back online, or that MMC can be instrumental in creating a resource for people, because it is really needed.
Yes, John, thank you for that. I want to call up Tom's question here about bringing different genres and potentially more challenging music to Greater Minnesota. And I think that the pre-work is of course even more important in a lot of ways, but also that we can't assume, of course, that there aren't people in these communities that do love different genres of music. There definitely are, but how you find them is not always super easy. And so I guess if you're looking at attracting, say, a younger audience, and there's not a community college in the town that you're visiting, or a four-year college or whatever, a way to easily access folks in their late teens and early 20s, looking again through that 60-mile lens, and seeing who you can kind of partner with to attract a certain demographic. But I do think then the pre-work of a workshop about like the history of hip hop or something like that can come to the community either the day before or the week before or the month before, to like building that into the programming to bring that again reciprocal exchange or education, and let folks get to know the artists in advance. It is one way to help bridge that.
Yeah, and we were part of a concert series in Granite Falls that was in a format that was kind of a hybrid performance and lecture series. It was called the Imbibe Sessions. And so it was like a 90-minute performance, and it was sort of songs interwoven with explication. And they had arranged this series where like each monthly show was about a different genre. And so we were there representing American folk music, but they had blues and jazz and hip hop and, a whole bunch of different sort of styles. And people were invested in the series. Like people in town wanted to come and see all of them, not just the ones that were focused around a genre that they liked. And so I think, it does take a specific kind of artist to do a good job of a show like that, since it is like kind of a hybrid teaching experience and performance experience. But I think that a lot of folks are good at both. But I think that it ended up being one of my favorite shows that I've ever done. And I think that just kind of thinking outside of the box in terms of like what a performance it can look like, or what kind of a modality you're delivering the information in, that can open up a lot more possibilities. I think also just, it's worth saying in a lot of these places, in the Twin Cities, like people are saying, well, it's Friday night. Like, do I want to go to a rap show, or do I want to go to like a, dance club, or do I want to go to a rock show or a mellow jazz show? And these folks are like, well, it's Friday night. There's one thing happening. Do I feel like going to it? And so the sort of threshold in some ways is much lower. It's like, well, it's a show. I want to go see a show, even if it's a genre I don't know that much about or an artist that I'm not familiar with. I think that the people in a lot of these communities who like art or like going to music or sort of identify as like someone that's one of their values, they're kind of into anything. There's just that feeling of pride of like, we're excited that this is happening in our community, kind of no matter what the style is. So I think, taking a chance and like hoping that those folks who are invested in making art thrive in their community will come kind of no matter what it is, and trusting that, I think I would say that I was guilty when I first started doing this work with Ash of sort of underestimating the folks in these towns and thinking like, well, I moved to Minneapolis from San Francisco and I'm in the big city and on the coast and blah, blah, blah. And like, I can't sing my like really confusing, intricate songs, when I'm up on the range, or I can't, if I'm on the prairie, I got to sing my like 3-minute long simple tunes. And it's just totally wrong. I mean, that was like an ignorant, awful coastal expectation that I brought to the work. And, I've just been proven wrong over and over again, like how bright and how daring and how adventurous the listeners are in these places. And of course, I'm a white dude and I'm singing folk music. And so it's less of a hurdle to, for some of these listeners. But I do think that they'll really rise to the occasion when you're throwing weird stuff at them. So that's kind of just a risk that is like worth taking, maybe is what I would say.
I think, yes, I'm just reading this comment here in the chat. And just wondering too, like, what are we doing with our venues? Reading this comment in the chat, helping our venues understand how to promote to which audiences also. So if they're typically a season ticket holding audience of an older demographic, maybe one thing that they do is like just put it in their season brochure and that's enough. But really articulating to the venue, actually, that's not enough for this particular show. We would like to have some more education around what this is and more targeted audience engagement. Are there any community groups in the area that might be a younger demographic that might be interested in this, that we can give a discounted ticket rate to or hold a certain number of seats for? But yeah, so just kind of see. Yes, great. So
could I
go
share
ahead.
something?
Yeah.
I am such a fan of the Minnesota State Arts Board. It was it kind of finding the opportunity that it offered was and for me it was like a lifeline, actually, in a lot of ways, because some of the activities, some of the things that I wanted to be doing out in the wider world were just too hard. I mean, basically, it's just I couldn't figure out a way to do it and make money. Basically, is really what essentially what it amounts to, and they gave me that opportunity to do larger performances. And I think that in the case of the new standards, in my old group, the Twilight Hours too, that setting is just so premium. It's like that performing arts center where people are actually paying attention. It's so great. It is so great. But I look at this Blue Nose co-op and I get really excited about something like this, because I think really for many of the artists, scaling up to the point where they can even would know what to do on the stage, even a relatively humble stage. Like, I mean, some of these performing arts centers, they're very special and they're amazing, but it's not like they're that huge. It's not like going to play the St. Cloud Pack or whatever, which is like it's big, or the State Theater, or even the Fitz or whatever. But it's still going onto a stage like that is a unique experience, and you actually have to get your chops. You won't know what to do up there unless you're really supremely gifted, or just have some experience, and you have to have opportunity to perform in these kinds of smaller venues where I think your partner is somebody, in many cases, is probably trying to make a living selling booze. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yep.
having bar owners and people like that who are invested in the idea of presenting music, that could be really transformational. It's like, it's a weird thing to say we need to strike up partnerships of that sort, because in a way it's like, are we corrupting our youth or whatever? But I mean, it was a way for artists to gain experience, for audiences to gain experience, and for audiences also. Audiences crave the experience of being in on the ground floor with anything. And once something is happening at a performing arts center, you're not on the ground floor. You're basically, you're bearing witness to a thing that is successful already. It may be amazing and great to you, but you don't have that unique audience experience of apprehension. That is a specific type of aesthetic experience where you just feel like you're engaging with something in a very primal, unique, first way, And so I wonder if there's some way that organizations like MMC or other partner organizations could seek to strike up partnerships with less blue stocking type of organizations, things that are a little bit more rough and ready. This is no, Joanna, this is no, believe me, I was a board member of MMC, and I love MMC, and I love what MMC is doing, and I love the ways that I see MMC changing right now. It's really very exciting to me. But I do wonder if there's opportunity there to try and reach out to people who are working in that way, where it's a little bit more gritty, And
Yeah. Yeah. And even just asking musicians, I was going to say, like, I think, Brian and I could spend a half an hour and look at the state map and be like, these are our favorite, awesome, breweries and DIY spaces and, like partners that we play at parks with or whatever, that maybe aren't like bricks and mortar spaces, but like really powerful, connected organizations that like totally get this work and have a strong pull. And I think there would be lots of musicians that could do that, right? So like maybe an open source list of these kinds of Blue Noses, and Goat Ridge Brewery in New London's another really great one. I mean, there's tons where it's like, you can still slam 50 or 100 people in these spaces, but it's this listening thing that, John, that you're talking about, and this like this kind of like deep gratitude exchange that happens with the audience, that is really hard to replicate, I think, in larger venues or venues where it's oversaturated, and in places where folks are really hungry. Then you kind of feed each other in that way.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I mean, like you're saying, John, about the the like brewery piece and the beer slinging piece. I mean, I think probably you could put together, any band, any sort of up and coming band could put together a great tour, not by searching for venues in greater Minnesota, but by searching for beer in greater Minnesota. Like, where's the brewery in this town? Where's the brewery in this town? And in many cases, those breweries, I'm thinking in Fergus, the Union Pizza Spot. We've done great shows there. Obviously, Blue Nose, the Tap Room. What's the Goat Ridge,
Goat Ridge,
and that neck of the woods. I mean, this hat I'm wearing, Revelation Ale House, way up in like 4 minutes from Canada. But same thing. Like the folks who are going to those breweries are invested in a sort of general way in making their town cool, and the pride of being at the brewery is like, I mean, often the beer is terrible, but people still, but they still go there because they're psyched that now our town is the kind of town that has a brewery. And I think that those are the same kinds of people who are like, now our town is the kind of town that has an experimental rock opera, even if we don't get it, so we're like sipping our Pilsner that's not that good, and we're listening to this music that we don't get, but we're psyched about it, And I do think that there could be like a really impressive sort of tour circuit or network or whatever, because those breweries then are totally invested in getting people to come out, because it sort of supports their own vision of themselves as like the new culture maker in town. And it's like, oh, nice. Yeah. But I think the same thing, and I'm just thinking of the vibes at the 331, which was like, anytime we had a new band, that was like the first place that we would play, even when we were a hot mess, because that's a perfect place to be a hot mess. I think that there's that same kind of energy that you're talking about in a lot of these breweries, and a lot of the local bands that are playing at them are a hot mess too, and everybody loves that as well. So yeah, I think you're really onto something there.
We have 2 minutes left, so I'd love to just kind of wrap us up and say, thank you all for joining us, and thanks for sharing your stories and your experiences. And I think Joanna, I would love to connect with you, down the line here about how DOPT and the work that we're doing in and with rural communities might be able to help put together some kind of resource like this for spaces that are open and welcoming and supportive of new or other genres or different kinds of experiences in the musical world.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Awesome.
Do you have any closings or any announcements or anything you need to do to wrap us up?
Not really, just encouraging everyone to stick around for all of the rest of the conference, and you can go to mnmusicsummit.org for the schedule and the links. Thank you both so much, Ash and Brian. I really, really appreciate all of this conversation. This is a topic that's dear to my heart. I love getting on the road, and I love meeting people and experiencing greater Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We'll see you hopefully
see you
soon.
all. yeah, we'll see you at some small town bar soon, I'm sure.
Definitely. Come to Granite Falls.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.